started out small, little static shocks, but they kept upping the juice till it felt like I was being eaten by lightning. Still, I was one of the lucky ones. The alien creepazoids didn't seem to like the results they got from some of the other kids.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and not that long ago, I brought Dwayne McDuffie, who's worked for a spell over at Milestone Comics, to talk about the relaunch of the Milestone universe at DC Comics. Obviously, has been announced a couple of times, but this week at Fandome, they actually confirmed it. We finally have our first details about what the Milestone relaunch is going to look like, at least early on. And here with me to talk about that again is Dwayne McDuffie. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Wes. Glad to be back and really excited to talk about this topic. So, yep, it's like, here we go, as they say.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to have you back, and finally we have some details, but I do want to say this before we get into all that. If you're just joining the channel for the first time, or if you've been coming around but haven't subscribed yet, there isn't a better time than today to subscribe to Thinking Critical YouTube. Hit the bell for notifications. Give us a big thumbs up if you enjoy this conversation. Give us a thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we would love to hear your feedback in the comments section. All right, Dwayne. So, like I said, you worked a spell over at Milestone Comics. You learned some things about the comic book industry, about creating and everything. Mm-hmm. Milestone left an impression on the comic book industry. We haven't had it for a while, but it is coming back, and it sounds like Static Shock is going to kind of be like the character that's out front and center. He's going to get his own graphic novel. He's going to get a digital series, and there's talk about an upcoming live-action movie coming along with it. Now, DC has a lot of character archetypes, but they really have never had that Spider-Man kind of teen hero character. Yep. They tried to do it with Sideways recently. Static Shock certainly fits that, like that character archetype. Are they making the right choice?
I think so. I think it can't be denied that Static was like the breakout character for Milestone, and I think precisely because it was, in a sense, like this modern update of basically the Peter Parker Spider-Man archetype. And it definitely proved popular enough to get the animated series, which to this day, much like Milestone, has made a great impression and is definitely revered and cherished by a lot of people. I wasn't a particular fan of the show, but as I was watching some YouTube videos where that series keeps popping up, I had to jump on YouTube and catch a couple of episodes, and I can see, at least from the writing wise, I wasn't big in terms of the animation, but writing wise, why the show was so popular and why it was so fresh. But Static is clearly Milestone's flagship character. There's no two ways about it. Showed up in Young Justice as a character as well, along with Icon and Rocket. And I think it's the right move. I think it's the right move to lead with it. I think the only con against going with Static would be that if I remember right, they did relaunch it as part of the New 52, and it didn't seem to last that long. And the only other thing is some people who I guess will just be I don't know if they're just being unkind or they're just taking a shot, will just say, like, they say, why would you take Black Vulcan and make him a teenager, or Black Lightning a teenager? Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot more to Virgil than just the powers, and I think that's what made the character so appealing. So I think it's definitely the best character to lead with. Now, the one thing I will say is I'm interested in seeing how they're going to handle the digital print strategy, because that's what I found interesting, was that they're going to launch as a digital comic first. So I'm presuming the way DC has been doing stuff like this lately, with like sort of revivals, like with the Batman animated series, that'll eventually translate into a print series in the store. I'm interested to find out with the graphic novel, one, are they going to do that both print and digital, and two, what the price is going to be? Because, I'm a big Firepower fan. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that graphic novel piece. But
so speaking of the graphic novel, the writer is going to be Reggie Hudlin. He's a longtime director, screenwriter in Hollywood. It's going to be illustrated by Ryan Baker, I believe.
No, Kyle Baker. Kyle Baker,
that's correct.
Yep.
And so I think that's a pretty good way to launch the character along with the digital series. DC Comics is putting way more emphasis on graphic novels and digital, using that strategy for Static Shock moving forward. Now, Reggie Hudlin, he doesn't pop in my head as somebody that's written a lot of comics in the past. But if you go and you look back at some of his credits in Hollywood, House Party, I'm a big fan of that one. We got Boomerang on there, Bebe's Kids. He was a producer on that one. More recently, he's had the big one would be Django Unchained. DC and Milestone are kind of hitching their wagon to him as kind of like their lead creator, at least early on as far as writing.
Yeah, and I mean that's yeah. If I had to say if there was any source of concern in terms of the voice of Milestone, it's with that bit. I mean, Reginald did do at least the one that I'm known of, where he worked on Black Panther for a bit.
He did a lot of work on
After with
Black Panther. That's what
yeah,
he's
Black
worked on.
Panther
My bad.
with John Romita Jr., which that translated into the motion comic series on BET. And I definitely see why they got Reginald involved in terms of from the relationship perspective of having that relationship throughout the entertainment industry to make something like a Static Shock live action film happen. In terms of the creative piece, I would say that the jury would have to be out. I'd have to see. I don't know if he's um, the right voice for it. I guess that's the best way I can put it. I'm surprised that at some point, and I mentioned this before, they hadn't gotten Christopher Priest on board. I mean, especially for something like more like Hardware or even something like Icon and Rocket. But I said, well, we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to prejudge what Reginald Hudlin can do. I definitely can see on the other side, the business side of it, what he can do in terms of like getting the properties into other industries and other medium to create those merchandising and licensing things. But in terms of like the creative voice or the lead talent, that I'm not as secure or as confident in. But you know, we'll see. It's like I've said on other occasions, it's theirs to lose.
Well,
There's no two
admittedly,
ways about
there's only one way to find out, and that's for it to
it.
launch.
Yep.
And that's this is
There
all
you
going to
go.
start rolling out in February 2021. Although there is going to be like I think a zero issue that comes out here in about
Yep.
2 or 3 weeks when they do the second half of Fandome. They're just kind of talking about the live action movie. There are no guarantees on that. DC
Yep.
at Fandome announced their live action movies and through 2022. Obviously, Static Shock is not on there. It's just in development, as a production. Cyborg was in development. They've had a lot of DC movies in development. I think there was another one, Gotham City Sirens. There's been a lot of things in development. Batgirl, and they never make it up there. So just because there's talk of it, there's no guarantees. But having a known screenwriter and director that has a reputation in Hollywood certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and that's the pro of having Reggie involved. Is that it's connections, it's relationships, it's the existing relationship that he has with Hollywood, and DC, of course, being the company that is connected to Warner Media, that just makes the likelihood of that all happening. What I thought was interesting was that as Reggie says, and I think this will probably come to fruition probably more quicker than the live action thing, is that they're talking about having them become part of the DC original movies, the animated ones. So the Vixen movie came out via that, which I'm sure was for them to test and see if it could translate into a series in the WB or into a movie itself. I don't know how much that character caught fire by being on Legends of the DC or whatever it is, that Legends of the DC universe, that series. But clearly, I think there being like a static animated, like an original animated movie is much more likely in the cards to pop up in the near future than the live action thing. And if there's a big enough response to it, like in other words, if this groundswell of pent up demand that people think is going on with Milestone, that dedicated fan base, if it translates into actual dollars and some of their other media efforts, then yeah, we'll see a live action static sooner than later. I guess my big thing about it is that what are they going to do, not just to reach out to the existing fan base for it, but what are they going to do to reach out to the potential fan base for it? I mean, Black Panther was a big movie. It was a hot movie. I think that audience is looking for more stuff like that. And that's why I found the digital aspect of the launch interesting, is that how are they going to use that to basically bring more eyeballs to it than the people who already know about the brand. That to me is that's what we'll see in the first 6 months to a year, how successful this Milestone project will be. Again, it just comes down to the marketing strategy. One thing that they're doing with Comixology is that they were re-releasing, I believe it's like each month they're gonna be re-releasing some of the books to it digitally. I would have liked to have seen them do something print-wise, kind of like what Valiant did when they did their revival, like having those like $9.95 4-issue graphic novels that you could pick up. Hopefully somebody get around to that, but we'll see. I'm always worried about the promotion piece. That's the big thing I'm worried about with Milestone's promotion piece, because that was a big issue the last time, and I'm not seeing anything right now that's addressing it this time around. It's how they promote it. You know?
One of the good things we're thinking about as a movie property for Static Shock is it looks like the DCEU, Warner Brothers, DC Films have kind of got their ducks in a row, and they've kind of figured out their strategy. Because you look at the movie slate that's coming out, you got your Suicide Squad, the Batman, there's Shazam 2 in there, Aquaman 2, I think. There's a good slate of movies. It feels like they have like a consistent, not consistent, but there's an idea of what DCEU is supposed to be. Much more, kind of like the MCU is certainly different, but the MCU, like what the MCU is. So when they announce a character like an Ant-Man or a Guardians of the Galaxy or even Captain Marvel, who maybe don't have the comic book sales or awareness, just having that brand name on it brings an entire audience. So hopefully by the time Static Shock comes out, the DCEU would kind of have built that kind of audience where there's a trust that, yes, this character is going to be good. It's being produced by a good movie house, and it's going to be worth seeing. And it'll be interesting to see if that happens. Now, they do talk about there is going to be at least one series launching in 2021. It's going to be Icon and Rocket, kind of like their version of Superman. And that one's also going to be written by Reginald Hudlin, but the artist is going to be one of the original founding members of Milestone, Denys Cowan. So I'm glad that they're actually going to be getting, a regular series out there, not just going the digital route or the graphic novel route. They're going to be hitting all the markets, and hopefully it'll just kind of grow from there. And I think an Icon comic with Icon Rocket will be cool. And I'd love to see Denys Cowan back on the characters.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So that, you're right. And that's a good point to bring up, because it seems like there is some thought being given in terms of a marketing perspective about how these products are translated. So if you think of that Static as for a much younger crowd, and at least the general thinking is that because of tablets and the reading habits, a younger crowd is going to more ably or find Static more in digital, then it makes sense. Whereas with Icon, which is a character that would appeal to guys of my age or people who remember from that point, to put it in print, and it'll be in digital as well, it seems like, okay, there is some thought being given to how we're going to release these properties out in which formats, and really being based in some sense on what they think the potential audiences are. I mean, to go back to the DCEU thing, and I agree with you. I think the DCEU figured out one big thing, which is we're not the MCU. We're not here. We're not going to find our success in building a shared universe that's interlocking through all these movies and everything else. It's like they've had a ton of success just making good standalone movies, whether it be Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Shazam. Hopefully it'll be a much better Suicide Squad around this time than the last one. And I think Static now has that potential to be one of those good standalone movies, which sort of turns into a standalone franchise. And then we'll just see if they get to the shared thing, which I think they just need to leave that strategy behind. Because, what are you basically making, I don't know, the Detroit JLA, if that was the case, you were going to do that shared thing, which is Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Static. But I think it definitely lends itself now for Static to have more success in that environment. And like I said, it's having Denys Cowan back at the drawing again is good. And just seeing that I think there is some thought being given to the marketing of the books, which is always good. It's just a question if they can get more eyeballs on it. And I think Static really is their best shot. I think he really, especially since you have you have the Black Lightning series on CW, which seems to have been enjoying some success, and you can see the similarities between those two characters. And but I think I think it's a good plan going forward. That they're taking their time getting stuff out there. They're not overwhelming the audience with like a whole line of comics. And we'll just see. I know a lot of people are going to be excited about Milestone being back out there again. So
I'll tell you, I'm almost most excited about you brought it up earlier, but that we're going to be getting some Milestone on Comixology. I have a Comixology account, but I haven't, I know their characters. I've read a little bit about Milestone characters, but I haven't read a lot of them. So I cannot wait for those to finally get out there, download them and finally get into those comic books. They're not really readily available, certainly not here in the Philippines. So I can't wait to finally get in there. And I've gotten so much feedback with our initial video about Milestone People love the characters. I want to see what they're all about and get even more excited for this relaunch. And hopefully, I do imagine we will be getting more information about other series coming even before we get the Static Shock digital series or the Icon Rocket, physical series. I think they'll probably have things in motion. This is just the first announcement. I think they wanted to have the focus, specifically on Static Shock, Reginald Hudlin, Denys Cowan, and then they'll start spreading the love out and get more details out here. And hopefully, they're not too distant future.
Yeah, and they're putting their best foot forward. It's like my hope is that, because like you said, you've read some of it, but my hope is with the comicology thing is that they really get the founding four out there. So for me, that's Icon, Hardware, Static, and Blood Syndicate. I was disappointed not to see a Blood Syndicate book in the lineup so far, but hopefully we'll get to that. But I think for those people who either don't have the books, haven't had access to them, this is the first time that you're getting introduced to it. It's like take advantage of reading those books digitally. I'm not a digital fan, but take advantage of reading those books. There's a lot of great stories in there, a lot of great concepts, a lot of great character work, a lot of great writing and storytelling. And I think, the industry is only for the better having Milestone be revived. And even though we will be in competition with each other, and not just because of my past ties to it, I really do wish them success with it. So it's like I said earlier, it's theirs to lose. They have a fan base that is there, and I think there's a fan base that's waiting. And it's just a question of whether they take the bull by the horns or not and run with it. So yeah, we'll see.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Gervain. Obviously, I'm excited for this. Really ready to read up on Static Shock, Icon, and the other Milestone characters. Blood Syndicate, even, it sounds interesting. Hopefully that'll be out on Comixology as well. It's a new day is dawning. We've heard about the relaunch for quite a few years. There's been a couple announcements. It feels like it's absolutely happening. They actually have details. It was at DC Fandome. Jim Lee was front and center talking about it. So I think it's a go, man. I'm excited.
Yep. They got a good launch. So like I said, they got to make it happen. So, but yeah, get out there, support those books. They're putting them back out there. And it's like, I think people will be really pleasantly surprised with what they find. So, yep, all the best to them.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.